Chrisean Rock may be facing the rest of her life in prison, and it all traces back to one mysterious death that investigators are now taking seriously. Detectives are looking at the evidence, and something about the timeline isn't sitting right with them. This isn't just internet speculation at this point. There's an active homicide investigation, and her name keeps surfacing at the center of it. Here's where it starts. A man named Ronnie had been publicly claiming for months that he, not Blueface, was the real father of Chrisean's son, Cross. He posted videos about it, confronted her about it in public, and even had a paternity test scheduled to settle it once and for all. Chrisean denied it and stayed mostly quiet through all of it, never directly engaging with his claims in any sustained way. Then, just weeks after that public confrontation, Ronnie died under circumstances nobody has ever fully explained. He wasn't known to be gang-affiliated, but rumors in the streets suggested he may have been silenced right before that paternity test could ever happen, which is exactly the kind of timing that makes people ask uncomfortable questions. It's been roughly 2 years since Ronnie's death, and TMZ has since reported that the investigation is still active. Chrisean is officially considered a person of interest. Homicide detectives have reportedly reached out to people connected to Ronnie, including a friend who goes by Major, who said on a live stream that detectives showed up at his door asking questions, and that he was scheduled to speak with them formally in the days that followed. He described the situation as genuinely serious, saying he'd told police there wasn't much he personally could tell them, but that they insisted on meeting in person and showing him evidence they had gathered, regardless of what he said over the phone. His own theory was that it had taken investigators far too long to start looking into a death that happened 2 years earlier, suggesting either new information had recently surfaced or that Chrisean herself might be facing real legal jeopardy soon, prompting a fresh round of questioning from everyone who knew Ronnie. Around the same time all of this resurfaced, Chrisean went live and casually announced she was moving out of the country, laughing about it without explaining why, teasing her followers with the news while refusing to give any real details. To a lot of people watching, that timing looked less like a coincidence and more like a red flag. The kind of move that raises real questions when someone is already being treated as a person of interest in an active homicide investigation. If law enforcement genuinely has reason to consider her a suspect, leaving the country wouldn't stop that process. It would likely just accelerate it, especially since authorities typically flag exactly this kind of behavior from anyone connected to an open case. On that exact same day, in what a lot of people found equally strange, Blueface publicly claimed Chrisean's son as his own after previously denying paternity altogether, at one point even joking the child was actually Charles Barkley's, a comment that circulated widely online at the time. He posted a photo with Chrisean and the baby captioned, "My son," which confused a lot of people given his long history of denial and distancing himself from the paternity conversation entirely. He then tweeted afterward, claiming he hadn't actually posted it himself, and the photo was quietly taken down shortly after, leaving fans even more confused about what exactly had happened and why the timing lined up the way it did with the renewed investigation attention. One of the clearer accounts of what happened came from Chrisean, someone close to both Chrisean and Ronnie, who sat down for an interview addressing the situation directly and openly. She confirmed she'd known Ronnie personally and that his death was real, not internet rumors spiraling out of control. When asked how he died, she was noticeably careful with her words, saying she couldn't speak on it directly, but that, in her own words, it doesn't look too good for certain people that we know. She confirmed Ronnie had confronted Chrisean in public, that a paternity test had reportedly been scheduled, and that shortly after that confrontation, he was simply gone. She described him as someone who genuinely loved Chrisean, calling their history passionate, but also acknowledging it as complicated in ways she didn't want to elaborate on further. She also shared something she said she'd never told anyone publicly before, that the night before she learned of his death, she'd had a disturbing dream involving him being shot. Something she said felt like déjà vu once she actually got the news from her brother the next day, describing the sensation as though she'd somehow already lived through it. Chrisean also addressed comments she'd made in an earlier interview that some viewers interpreted as her insinuating Chrisean may have had something to do with Ronnie's death. She clarified she didn't know anything concrete. only that Ronnie had reportedly been in contact with Chrisean the night he died, which she considered the one real red flag worth mentioning in the entire situation. She also described Chrisean, based on her own personal knowledge of her, as someone known for being impulsive and for sharing people's addresses or personal information in the heat of the moment. Details that, combined with the timing of Ronnie's death, are part of what's kept investigators genuinely interested in her specifically, rather than simply moving on. Blueface, for his part, hasn't exactly helped Chrisean's case either, whether intentionally or not. In past comments, he's echoed similar characterizations of her as impulsive and prone to reckless behavior, which hasn't done much to quiet the speculation about whether she could have played some role, even indirectly, in what happened to Ronnie, whether that meant giving out his location to the wrong people, being caught in circumstances that simply looked worse than they were, or something investigators are still working to fully untangle. Both Chrisean and Blueface have addressed the situation publicly since all of this resurfaced, though neither has said much of real substance when pressed directly. In one interview, Blueface was asked about his sister, seemingly insinuating he had something to do with Ronnie's death, and he brushed it off as an out-of-context clip pulled from an otherwise unremarkable interview, saying that was apparently the only soundbite that got any real attention afterward. He's maintained publicly that Ronnie's issues in the streets predated the situation entirely and had nothing to do with him or Chrisean, instead describing Ronnie as someone who saw a clear opportunity for attention once the story went public, doing paid interviews, pushing his own music career, and getting more publicly involved than Blueface felt was ever warranted, especially given that paternity was never actually confirmed through testing. Chrisean, meanwhile, has said in her own interviews that she believed the paternity claims were false from the very start, though she still acknowledged that Ronnie came from a genuinely supportive family, a mother, grandmother, and sisters who, by her account, would have fully embraced the child had it actually turned out to be his. So where does the investigation actually stand right now? According to Major's account, the pattern that's emerged is one where homicide detectives have been slowly working outward from people close to Ronnie, and Chrisean's name keeps surfacing as the common thread. The public confrontation, the paternity test that never happened, the contact between them the night he died, and now her own talk of leaving the country right as attention on the case ramped up again. None of that amounts to proof of anything on its own, and it's worth being clear about that. Investigators haven't publicly named her as anything more than a person of interest, and no charges have been filed against her. But nearly 2 years after Ronnie's death, the fact that detectives are actively reopening conversations with people connected to him, showing up at doors and scheduling formal interviews, suggests this case is far from closed and may be moving towards some kind of resolution soon. What's clear is that this situation involves more than just online speculation at this point. Real detectives, real questioning, and a paternity question that never got its answer because the one person capable of settling it is no longer here to do so. Whether that's simply tragic timing or something investigators genuinely believe points to more, that's exactly what this active homicide investigation is trying to determine, and the answer could reshape how the public views everyone involved. Given how long this case has already stretched on, and how many people connected to Ronnie are reportedly now being re-interviewed, it seems unlikely this stays quiet for much longer. So I want to know what you guys think. Do you believe Chrisean could actually be connected to what happened to Ronnie, or do you think this is just circumstantial timing that's been blown out of proportion online? Let me know exactly where you stand, and drop your thoughts in the comments below.